Gun manufacturer hoping to double the size of its plant. 2 dead from listeriosis outbreak related to non-milk, silk, and Great Value milk brands. Newfoundland and Labrador and Manitoba agreed to accept some of Quebec-based asylum claimants. Minister Randy Boissonneau's former business partner claims his texts about a guy named Randy were just autocorrects. Black man is shot and killed in his neighborhood because the RNC is in town, and 9 dead at a mine collapse in northern Kenya. Good morning. It's Thursday, July 18th. I'm Nora. Here are your headlines. We start today in Kitchener, where Kitchener City Council has been asked to approve doubling the size of the Colt Canada plant there. Colt Canada, if you're not aware, is an arms manufacturer. Mark Douglas from City News reports that the addition will include more space at its manufacturing plant, a parking lot, and an enclosed pedestrian bridge to the plant. To build the parking lot, 2 houses will have to be demolished. Douglas mentions that back on February 28th, there was an anti-war protest outside of Colt for what he writes was, quote-unquote, alleged involvement in the so-called Israel/Hamas war. Colt has been given a contract worth $35 million to build machine guns, and a few years ago was given $6.5 million contract to manufacture C-20 rifles. There will be a public meeting on August 12th, and council will vote for it on August 26th. Remember that when the feds talk about a housing crisis, there's always room to tear down houses to build a parking lot so that the weapons manufacturers in Canada can make more weapons and make more money. Next, to an update on the listeriosis outbreak I told you about last week. 2 people have died as a result of the outbreak. There have been 12 listeriosis cases that Health Canada is investigating. Now, apparently this outbreak has been going on for a long time. The people who've become sick were made sick sometime between this month and last August, according to the CBC. Next to national news. After the Council of the Federation meeting in Halifax, Manitoba and Newfoundland Labrador took up Quebec's call to help them settle asylum seekers. That came after a joint call from the premiers to settle people more evenly across Canada. But no other premiers have offered. Manitoba's support is only going to happen, though, says Premier Wab Kinew, if the feds cough up some money. The article by Maura Forrest at the Canadian Press mentions that Quebec has 50% of all asylum seekers in Canada, a stat that she attributes to the government of Quebec. She does add some Stats Can data at the bottom of her article and writes that Quebec has 190,000 asylum seekers in the province. But Forrest doesn't give us any other provincial numbers and instead mixes in all types of non-permanent residents with the numbers, which basically tells us nothing. As of 2023, the UNHCR estimated that 64% of all asylum claims in Canada were made in Quebec in the first 3 months. And then for the rest of the year, Ontario had 40% of all claims and Quebec had 41% of all claims. The drop between the first part of the year and the second was due to expanding the so-called Safe Third Country Agreement. Next, Federal Employment Minister Randy Boissonneau is before the Ethics Committee over allegations that he continued to do business after he was sworn into cabinet, and a year after Boissonneau said he stopped working with his former business partner, Stephen Anderson. CBC's Kate McKenna reports that in many text messages, Anderson refers to quote-unquote Randy while corresponding with Melvina Gaoui. She is suing the company that Boissonneau founded with Anderson, which was called Global Health Imports. Now, that doesn't sound evil at all, Global Health Imports. Anderson explained that he didn't mean Randy as in Randy Boissonneau, even though in one reference it was that Randy was in Vancouver at a time when Boissonneau was in Vancouver. No, the 9 times that he mentioned Randy in his text messages, he explained to the committee, was an autocorrect error. Never in the texts before the committee did Anderson correct the autocorrected Randy. NDP Matthew Green identified that Anderson was pretty clearly lying. Boissonneau, for his part, is concerned that Anderson is texting about him and urged Anderson to just come clean to the committee. Next to international news, and first to news that is about 1.2 kilometers away from the Republican National Convention. A black man named Samuel Sharp was shot and killed by 5 cops while another man was charged. Sharp was living in a tent near where he was shot. The cops were from the Columbus Division of Police, who are based in Ohio. They are visiting Milwaukee to work security for the RNC. The shooting has angered local residents who said that this situation should have been de-escalated. The neighborhood where all this happened is 1.2 kilometers from the convention center where the RNC is meeting, something that the Columbus police called the quote-unquote outer perimeter of the RNC to justify playing judge, jury, and executioner. Sharp's cousin, Lisa Sharp, said this, quote, "They came into our community and shot down our family right here at a public park. What are you doing in our city shooting people down?" Unquote. And finally to Kenya, where at least 5 people have been killed by a gold mine collapse in the north of the country. Many others have been injured. Reuters is calling the mine a, quote, informal gold mine, unquote. It caved in and buried the victims. The mine is located near the border with Ethiopia. It's called the Hilo Subsistence Gold Mine. Some 1,000 people were trying to dig at the mine, which triggered its collapse. One local resident said that the death toll was actually 9, including 4 Ethiopians. Back in May, 5 miners died at Hilo in similar circumstances. Those are your headlines for Thursday, July 18th. I'm Nora. Listen, our friends at Apple Canada, you know what? I can say that. Our friends at Apple Canada, I'm not just saying that because I'm advertising. I'm not advertising for them right now. Our friends at Apple Canada Podcasts have helped me out getting a better feed link for you. So if you are listening to this podcast through Apple Podcasts, you can find it at Loretto Daily News. How cute is that? Just look up apple.co/Loretto Daily News. There's also a page for Sandy and Nora at Apple Podcasts that is new. So if you are one of the majority of the listeners to Sandy and Nora who listen through Apple, hopefully you'll find the new podcast feed that way. You are listening to this podcast at sandynora.com, on the Real News Network podcast feed, or anywhere you get your podcasts, like maybe apple.co/Loretto Daily News. I hope you have a wonderful Thursday, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.